Welcome to the first episode of the Sport Analytics podcast. Today we're joined with Justin Newman, who is the Head of Player Analysis at the Pittsburgh Pirates. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking time to chat with me today.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on this first episode of this podcast, and we would love to go through your journey. So, I would like to first ask, if you can walk us through your career journey with the Pirates. You obviously started as a baseball informatics intern. You've been with the organization for around 8 years now. So, how did your responsibilities evolve with each promotion leading up to your current role as head of player analysis?
Sure. Yeah, I think starting out as an intern, you're working in a little bit more of a support role. You were, this cool opportunity with the Pirates that had the opportunity both to support others in their work, helping with queries and doing smaller analyses, but then also had the independence to be able um, to do my own work and share that with others in the group. So that's kind of how it started out was as an intern, just being able to to help any of our different analysts with queries and other support work. But then getting to do that other work in my spare time. But then as time evolved, a lot of the work I was doing was more directly demanded by other groups within baseball operations. So after my internship, I went on to become a draft analyst. That's where I spent most of my time here. Um, and I think there's a couple main things where I have more direct interactions with amateur scouting. And then secondarily, um, there's a lot more ownership over the whole process, starting from the code all the way down um, to like how you're communicating with end users. So um, that was kind of the first big jump in responsibility is being responsible for everything from the producing the information to presenting it. Um, and then over the last year or so, I've been in a little bit more of a management leadership type of role. Um, so now I have an awesome group of people behind me who can help um, help with a lot of this work, and I give them some guidance and guardrails to work within, and they're able to kind of really run within those guardrails. So it's a little bit of a different seat that I'm in now.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And obviously, you've been with a lot of different roles within the organization. So I want to ask, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when transitioning from one role to the next? Obviously starting as a quantitative analyst role and moving more towards a managerial position now.
Yeah, I mean, I think um, first I'll talk about like going from like an intern to full time. Um, I was figuring out a lot of that on the fly. Like I was um, pretty young, and I was a year or two out of college, and I was and in the draft room. Um, asked to present information um, on players to inform our draft decisions. So I made a lot of mistakes, right? I figured out a lot of it as I went along, um, and um, but yeah, and then talking more about the like individual to contributor to management role. Um, I think there's kind of no playbook for um, transitioning from a more of like an IC role to a management role. So um, a lot of a lot of that was also figuring out as we go and just relying kind of on your instincts and your gut and whatever your core principles might be to help people grow and hopefully impact decisions across the Pirates.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really interesting, and it's great to see the upper mobility that you had throughout the organization. Working up to a really high role. I want to ask, could you describe a typical day in each of your previous roles and how your focus maybe changed over time, particularly now as the manager of research and development?
Yeah. So when I was a draft analyst, a lot of my time was spent coding if it was kind of the off season. Um, so just trying to develop new metrics, tools, models. So, a lot of the focus of an off season might be trying to improve our draft model, whether that's adding additional features or trying to do more with the information that we do have. Um, and then more in season, right? The day to day is a little bit more focused on taking the results of those models and trying to translate them um, to scouts. Um, so it could be targeting, um, sending out target lists to scouts of here's some players who are interesting who we don't yet have reports on. Um, or here are some guys we've scouted a little bit, but we want to see some more. So a lot of the day to day was either in like the coding or doing short player write ups. Um, Nowadays, I spend a lot of my day on meetings, and basically just trying to work together with my colleagues and um, build some of the larger structures of here's how we should structure a player write up, um, and then helping them, with different problems that they're facing, whether that's they get crossed up by a certain difficult profile of a player, or if that's they're trying to figure out a way to improve an existing model or build a new one, and just trying to help support them in any way that I can. And lucky that I have a cool group where I can learn a lot from them and hopefully help them a bit too in the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear like the journey that you had to go through. And now I want to talk about your new role as head of player analysis. So, looking ahead to your new role, what are your like primary goals for the department, and like what type of innovations do you hope to implement?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we're um, trying to do is to take our insights and make decision making easier for anyone, whether that's a coach, a coordinator, a scout, or the GM. Right? We're trying to um, target our analysis and reports in a way that is geared towards easy decision making. So it's probably only so much I can share there for some proprietary reasons,
Yeah.
but that's kind of some of the overarching mission that we're trying to achieve in the player analysis group. And then the other thing that we're working on is trying to, we have analysts that work on player development, the draft, pro evaluation, international, and we're trying to make it so that those evaluations look as similar as possible, and they're all guided from some of the same core principles.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I wish the best of luck to you in your new role. Also, want to ask, to the extent which you can answer this, what types of predictive models do you and your team build most often, and how do they influence decisions within the organization?
Yeah, there's quite a range of models that people are building from, you know, things like computer vision models, all the way to simple linear regressions, the more sophisticated machine learning models like neural networks, to statistical models such as mixed models or Bayesian models. So the way our team is structured, um, a lot of those more involved longer term models are built in our data science team. Um, and then our player analysis team is responsible for um, collaborating with them to help guide some of the baseball principles behind those models, and then taking those models and applying them and using them for write-ups and communicating with our end users. um, so our group is doing some shorter-term research, some smaller studies that might inform some of the data science work, but a lot of that data science work is done under a slightly separate umbrella, which is a part of our large R&D group. So I'm not as directly responsible for managing some of those longer-term research projects, but I think myself and our entire player analysis group are um, really key stakeholders and collaborators with our data scientists in developing those models.
Yeah, I think it's really essential to have that collaboration between those different departments to ensure it benefits the team as a whole. Want to ask like which programming languages and tools do you think are most integral to your team's workflow, and are there any like emerging technologies that maybe excite you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, so I think like the for data science or analysis work, right? R and Python are kind of the standards. We have some people who use R, some who use Python, some who use both. For us, if you're good in one, that's great. You don't have to be an expert in both necessarily. Um, we also use a little SQL. Then on the emerging technologies front, I would say ChatGPT is a pretty exciting tool. I mean, I've just been playing around with the newest O1 version and kind of impressed with what it's able to output and how it can help guide your research on not just, hey, can you code this for me, but um, here's how you can think through this conceptually, and here's where there might be pitfalls. Just a little bit that I've scratched the surface with it has been really impressive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to ask, throughout your time with the Pirates, is there like maybe a particular project or analysis that stands out as a favorite or a game changer for the team to the extent you can reveal?
Yeah, yeah. Probably my favorite thing that I work on is our draft model. Um, and that's basic. What that is basically taking um, all of the inputs in our scouting and you know draft process. So that could be anything from the player's age to some performance information to bat or ball tracking data we get, and then our scouting reports and um, evaluations that scouts put on a player, and trying to combine those things to ultimately predict um, some form of major league value for a player. Um, so I think some of the cool thing about that is not just the data science um, and analysis work itself, but actually getting to see how our decision making evolved over time to be more centered around our draft model, and we're now at the point where our draft model is what sets our board, and we have a very specific process for moving players off of that draft model, and I really enjoy both the process of building the model and then trying to figure out where might be the gaps or holes that would allow us to bet against the model or take the over under on a player.
Yeah, and it's been really inspiring to hear, the journey that you've gone through with the Pittsburgh Pirates. You've been there for a great amount of time, so it's really inspiring. Would like to move to a little bit of a different realm. What advice would you give to aspiring analysts who want to break into Major League Baseball or professional sports in general?
Yeah, couple things jump out here. Um, One, I think something that's different now than when I was trying to break into baseball many years ago, is that there's a lot of different ways you can skin a cat, a lot of different ways that you can add value to a team. So when I started, departments consisted of 5 people, so you have to be able to do the database work, build a model, analyze a player, and communicate with the coach or scout, right? And that was fun and I think a great learning experience. But now, but I think that led to more jack of all trades kind of requirements, where now you don't necessarily need to be an expert on the baseball side if you're willing to learn and you can build an awesome model. Or on the other side of it, right? If you're really good on the baseball side and the applied side, you might not be able to be the one that generates all the code and all the models or database code behind the information you're presenting. So um, basically what I'm getting at is I think there's a lot more room for specialization. Um, there's, skill sets from computer vision to physics to biomechanics to, the more traditional analyst statistical modeling skill sets that can all add value to a major league team. So kind of the broader takeaway is figure out what it is that is your kind of superpower or your special skill, and really lean into that. And you don't have to try and be everything to everyone. You don't have to know R, Python, SQL, Shiny, Tableau, right? Just figure out what it is that you can um, do that other people can't do, and really run with that.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring advice for students like me trying to, enter the industry at one point. When hiring for your department, what types of projects or portfolio pieces have, maybe caught your attention the most, or maybe in general, anything that maybe stands out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Let me think for a second on that one, if there's anything specific. Um, I would say in general, like any kind of published research is a huge plus if we're looking more on the data science side. Um, on the analyst side, um, looking for creativity and how you think about the game. So we've had people who have, run their own baseball analytics squads, um, and just seeing someone think creatively about in-game strategy or player evaluation or anything that makes you think, like I hadn't quite thought of it that way. I think that's what we're looking for, something that can really separate chemists.
Yeah, it's really valuable advice. For someone just starting out, which areas of analytics or programming would you recommend they focus on mastering first?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I'm kind of a big believer in that um, getting a good foundation in programming, not even any specific language, but just in like an intro to computer science type of class. So the one I took was in Java, and I haven't written a line in Java since I left college, but I got all the fundamental concepts of iteration and logic and things like that, which is, I think, a really good foundation to build on. Um, and then I think on the statistics side, I think there's a lot of interesting things in econometrics and some like the more applied quantitative social sciences. I think there's a lot of similarities and overlap between um, the thinking in econometrics and thinking in baseball. So we are constantly dealing with confounding variables. We're trying to understand the relationship between velocity and ERA, right? Um, but oftentimes this is confounded by something else, where the players with higher velocity tend to have worse command when you're looking at major league players, and players who throw 85 to 87 miles per hour um, almost exclusively have great command, otherwise they wouldn't be in the major leagues. So I think there's a lot of the same kinds of thinking and like an econometrics type of course that really applies pretty well to baseball.
Yeah, that's really valuable advice, I'm sure, for a lot of our viewers. So here at Sport Analytics, our platform, focuses on educating and certifying aspiring analysts. From your perspective, what skills or topics would you like to see emphasized in like certification courses?
It's a great question. Um, so I mean, there's I think a lot of different ways that you could um, take it. I think there's a million different methodologies that you could teach, but I think the most important thing is teaching, as you're teaching the methodologies, making sure to teach some of the problem solving and understanding some of the pitfalls of how you can, the data you might be dealing with, right? So I think what separates the really good junior candidates um, from the average ones is that they're able to really understand the data they're working with, and not just throw a bunch of things into a model, but make really well motivated decisions behind why they're doing what they're doing, and make sure that they're um, you know if there's any limitations of their analysis, be able to communicate that. So it's a bit of a scattered answer, but hopefully something in there that helps you guys out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful. Are there any like common skill gaps that you notice in candidates applying for analytics positions? And how do you
Mm-hmm.
think our programs can, like ours, can help address those?
Yeah, I think I think some of the most common ones that we see. This is more in like data science hiring. Is that there's people who are, really, really bright and way more gifted technically than myself or many other people. Um, but then they lack some of the um, motivation and baseball or sports understanding to be able to connect their methodology to the work that they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one, and then um, on the analyst side, I think that we tend to get more people who have really strong baseball backgrounds, and then it's more about trying to get their technical skills up to the right level. So I think in general, like strong programming foundation, ability to write models and R or Python are things that can help people really get up to speed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And obviously, you have probably experienced, baseball analytics on, its expansion and how much it's changed since you entered the Pirates. So, how have you seen the field of baseball analytics evolve since you started, and where do you think it's headed in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so to even go further back, right, the first people hired in baseball analytics were the ones who were just most able to convince um, a decision maker that we should value walks, as an example, right? Um, this was like something that was pretty well known if you were reading the early days of baseball prospectus and other blogs on the internet, right, in the year 2000, but no one in front offices was actually using that information to make decisions. So back then, you have to be able to convince people that just, hey, walks are valuable, or pitchers don't control batted ball results, right? Um, Kind of the second wave of people that were hired were more when pitch FX data came out in 2008, 2009. Then there's this huge influx of data on every single pitch, measuring not just the result of it, but the spin rate, velocity, location, movement, etc. And the skill set that required was more of like a database data engineering skill set, where you needed someone who could actually process this information, and you could gain a competitive advantage just by loading this information and describing the players who had the best spin rates, the best vertical movement, and you might be able to gain an edge over other teams. But then I think the next wave was more taking those insights and being able to build a model that not just says, hey, this is a high vertical movement pitch or a high spin rate pitch. Here's actually what this means for the expected value of a pitch, right? So that kind of necessitates more of a data science or modeling research type of skill set. Um, Going forward, I have a couple thoughts. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of potential insights to be gained from the biomechanics information that MLB has put out there. Also takes a huge amount of data science and data engineering to be able to even work with that data. But I think we're going to continue to get a level deeper in understanding, maybe how you might generate a certain vertical movement or spin rate, right, from a biomechanical perspective. So that's the biggest one. The other one that I'd throw out there is just whether teams start bringing in internal people to actually start building new technology to collect different information than other teams can get. So all 30 teams have access to the same bat, ball, biomechanic tracking data. But I can imagine a world 5 or 10 years down the road where you're bringing engineers in house to try and build technology that will allow you to collect different data than other teams are collecting.
Yeah, I think the field seems to have a lot of potential, to grow, in many ways. Having worked your way up, what lessons about leadership and teamwork have you learned that you would share with others looking to grow in this field?
That's a great question. Um, I think one of the biggest things that jumps out to me is just be yourself, care about people. Um, I think there's a lot, in baseball and in other industries, there's a lot of like type A people who really want to be ambitious and move up. And I think that, sometimes can serve people in the short term, but um, in the longer term, I think the biggest thing um, that I've seen have success is just wanting to invest in people, wanting the best for people, and that can take a number of different forms of investing in their growth and putting the right resources in front of them to help them grow, to making sure that they have a healthy work life balance and don't get burned out. So I think those are the biggest takeaways I have.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot for all that information. And I just want to close this by asking, do you have any final words or wisdom for aspiring analysts or advice for us as we launch this podcast and continue to develop our platform?
Yeah, I would say for aspiring analysts, the biggest thing I can say is just um, get your work out there and do independent research or do your own analysis, right? So there's um, tons and tons of students nowadays who have the requisite programming skills and have some experience working with the team at their college, right? Um, so you're not separating yourself anymore by just being able to program or having some baseball knowledge. The way to separate yourself, I think, is to be able to show, hey, here's an analysis I did on a player, um, and make someone with the team say, I hadn't thought of that before, or this is an interesting angle on this player, or I like the way they approach the biomechanics part of this write up, or if you want to be more on like the longer term research data science side, then um, find some public data and build a model and do a short write up on it or build an app or something to visualize it and share that model because I think ultimately um, that's the best way to kind of separate yourself from the pack.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Justin. Your advice and your experience has been really valuable to us, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers will use it to good use. Thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in to our first episode of our Sport Analytics podcast, and we will see you next time.